Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Velasco Cortez, and I will be one of the presenters for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and we all hope that the pointers here that we're going to present today can help you through your undergraduate career. Um, we can start by moving to the next slide, where we each have a bio of ourselves. I'm not sure if Crystal can hear me, but okay, so she's moving the slides for us. Alex Viegas, our other team member for this project, was unable to join us today, but if you guys have any specific questions for him based on his background, you can relay that to us before the end of the presentation tonight or via email, and we'll forward those questions to him. Um, so a little bit about Alex. He graduated from UC Davis with a degree in biological sciences, neurology, physiology, and behavior. And he was our classmate at the UC Davis formal postbac program. I myself graduated from UCLA with a double major in biology and Chicano studies, and after which I completed did a informal postbac program at UCLA Extension. I did this for a while before joining the formal UC Davis postbac program. And I'll let Crystal, who is also with us tonight, introduce herself.
Hi everyone, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Thank you so much. So my name is Crystal. I'm the other organizer for the Together We Mentor event today. I also went to UCLA and graduated with a BS in microbiology, immunology, and molecular genetics. I also got a minor in Italian. After that, I did an informal postbac program through the UCLA Extension department, and after that, I did a formal program through UC Davis postbaccalaureate consortium program.
Okay, so now we'll proceed to our first slide, which is succeeding in pre-medical classes. We wanted to speak to you guys about active versus passive studying. And just a reminder, if you guys have any questions throughout the presentation, if it's something quick that we can answer, we'll answer as we go. The way that you do this, if you're new to GoToMeeting, is by commenting. We prefer that you comment, and then we'll reply on the comment section, or save the questions for the end. We'll save the questions for then, but we'll get to your questions. So if you think of something, just add it, and we'll have it there for the end. But so this slide is talking about active versus passive studying, and we each wanted to share
Hi, Elizabeth.
hello, I think.
I can hear you.
Hi, was I muted that whole time?
For a little bit, I think. So maybe if you want to start again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. Thank you for that. So, I don't know if you guys heard the part where type the questions if you have any questions, please, and we'll get to it either through the presentation or at the end, depending on the extent of the question. Basically, this first slide, we wanted to speak to you guys about active versus passive studying, and basically what worked for us, like little pointers here and there that we've picked up throughout these years. So for me personally, and Crystal will touch upon her experience in a moment, but for me, what ended up working for me was previewing the lectures before going to lectures, and then podcasting or listening to the audio for anything that I might have missed. It's very tempting for me even now to listen to the whole podcast, which it's very time consuming and sometimes not the best because you're spending so much time, right? But what worked ultimately best was going to lecture and really being present and active in pretending like you don't have a recording, basically pretending like you're gonna get it there or never, so that later you can just go back to your podcast or to your recording and fill in the gaps where you didn't fully understand. And as I was doing this, I was taking detailed notes, or I would take detailed notes and write down questions for for the professor that I had, which then I would take to office hours. And we have a note here that most professors are flexible when with you dropping in. So if you're not ready by the time office hours come, and again, this is just my opinion, but for me, it didn't make it wasn't of service for me to go to office hours if I didn't have questions prepared. Sometimes it helps because you can learn. People say you can learn from other people's questions, and you can, but but for me, it gave me a lot of anxiety, like not being able to follow, which is why when I did best when I pushed myself to review those lectures and to have questions uh, by the time I went to office hours, or else I would just be lost and more anxious, really, versus those times that I was actually prepared when I went to office hours. And when somebody else asked a question, I could actually follow what they were saying and learn from it rather than it scaring me more because I would think, this is one other thing that I don't know yet. So I think it's confidence really also that helps. So being prepared helps. My suggestion here, and something that I didn't know before, is like when I was in undergrad in my earlier years, I thought that the hours that were set were the ones that were available in the period. That's it. But later I found that if you're not ready by that time, but you still have questions, maybe communicate this to your professor and ask for office hours possibly later in the week so that you have time to fully look at your notes and be more prepared when you go, even if it's just you and the professor, which might end up being better even because you have that one-on-one. And yeah, so those are my tips for preparing for office hours. Before, after office hours, I would look at it again, maybe do a quick study guide, uh, practice questions if there are any up. Question banks are perfect for checking like how you've understood this material and coming up with more questions if you have more. We have notes here, but I'll let Crystal fill in anything else or the other points that we have pending.
Hi, everybody. So just echoing everything that Elizabeth mentioned already, the difference between active and passive studying is that active studying is you're actually recalling what you just learned. So this is how medical students learn because the amount of information is so much that they have to make sure that they memorize it. And just going over what it's on the slide here, previewing the lectures, going to lecture, podcasting. Again, this is something that takes a lot of time. So I would most likely not do this for courses that are just giving you so much material that you can't keep up. Um, and then, but I would make sure to do active learning instead. So, which is why we came up with the whiteboard method. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, which is just pretty much having a white piece of paper and just writing after going to class and sitting down. You're supposed to be able to fill white a white piece of paper with what you learn. And if you can't do that, you have to go back to your lecture, look over it, the whole thing again, and then try it again. And to do this, you don't necessarily have to use the whiteboard method. There's different things that you can use, but work just as well. So Anki or Quizlet. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with either one, but Quizlet is just flashcards that are online. They're free. It's a free service. I think if you want extra features, then there's a fee that you can pay annually. Anki is the same thing as Quizlet. The only difference is that Anki gives you spaced repetition. And spaced repetition, what it means is that it tracks how many times you've seen a flashcard. So if you see a flashcard and you click that it's an easy flashcard or that you know it already, it'll show it to you again in like a day. And then it'll show it again to you in like 4 days. So the program does that for you instead of you doing it for yourself. And for me personally, I prefer Anki over Quizlet because for Anki, it's a free service, so you don't have to pay anything. I think only if you want to get the app on your phone or your tablet, then you would have to pay. I think it's like 20, and then that's it. But it's a great feature, the space repetition, and then they have additional things that um, you can add onto your account, like mapping your progress. They also have a thing called image occlusion, which is just putting an image up and then covering the whatever you need to learn from that image. And it's also a very popular program that medical students use, especially for STEP. So I think I would definitely go check that out if you're interested. There's a bunch of YouTube videos that show you how to use it. It's a little more complex to learn than Quizlet, but you can definitely figure it out. There's also cheat sheets, which is my another technique that I use to memorize things. So just again writing down important things onto a cheat sheet and just kind of remembering the location or mapping it with your head. And also charts. Charts, I feel like, are a great way to just compare and contrast information, which I think it's great for classes that give you a lot of material. Question banks, a lot of schools have question banks. For example, UCLA has their own question banks where other students are graceful enough to go drop off their midterms or quizzes, whatever it is, and then you can just go check them out. Um, you can check with your institution if they have that. Some institutions don't have that, but that's where the benefit of joining pre-health organizations comes in. I know that some organizations have older alumni that are creating those question banks for you guys to keep. And also YouTube is a great resource. So studying for the MCAT the MCAT, it's the admissions test that you need to apply to medical school. And the MCAT pretty much tests everything so pretty much all the subjects that you've seen in your pre-med classes, in the general pre-med classes, that's what the MCAT will test. So I always tell pre-med students to, even if you're not studying for the MCAT, but say that you're taking a general chemistry class right now because you're a sophomore, or you will take a physics class, I think it's a great idea to go and look at the YouTube videos for Khan Academy, the MCAT section, for whatever class is that you're taking or that you will take, because the MCAT Khan Academy is a great resource. They do a great job in summarizing the concepts that you need to study for the MCAT and more making it easier for you to learn. So I think complementing that with whatever course you're studying now will help you tremendously for when you're studying for the MCAT later on. I think that's something that I wish I would have done. And then lastly, scheduling your study time. That's very, very important. I think it's hard to cram for a test. And from other mentors, I've learned that at least you should allow yourself to have a week to study for whatever midterm or final that you prepare for so that you can accurately divide your time. And I'm happy to show you how to do that if there's any questions about this.
Just adding on to what Crystal was saying in the previous slide about scheduling time. Yeah, also feel free to message us to have a sample of something that we've used in the past. But with scheduling the study time, something that has worked for me personally has been having a schedule Monday through Sunday. just so that you have an idea, I want to go into it here as well a little bit, is having a schedule Monday through Friday. And it's like a block schedule. I usually block it out from like 7 a.m. to midnight, or whatever the hours that work for you best. So basically just block those hours out, have Monday through Sunday. And then as students, if many of you guys are still taking classes, I would put in your classes, like your main core classes, what time you have that. If you have work, what time do you have that? So you're blocking it out. And what else? Office hours, so that you know by what date you should be ready. Like we were talking about being ready before office hours. So that's I'm a very visual person, so that really helps me, and I think it might help a lot of you as well if that's the way you like to see things as well. So having your office hours there blocked out will constantly remind you to, I need to be ready before these office hours, or else I'm gonna have to schedule something else with the professor, and there's a chance that he or she might not be able to. That's always, they are lenient, but sometimes you'll get a no, sometimes you'll get a maybe. So it's best if you just are prepared on time. Another point that okay, so back to scheduling. So that's the block scheduling. Aside to a side of my schedule, what worked best for me was having a to-do list. And I personally like blocking off study time, but I don't per se have it minute by minute, but I have a to-do list at the side. So within that block schedule, okay, I have X amount of things that I need to do. And what I do is I divide it between personal and academic. So say you need to pay a bill. That way you're not mixing your study time with your personal time, so you can block out 2 hours to take care of personal business. You need to do laundry, you need to go grocery shopping. That way you don't cut into your study time and you're taking time from your study time to do other things. So that's personally how I do the scheduling time. That works a lot for me. And going back, I know that Crystal spoke about active versus passive learning. The whiteboard method is good. And yes, again, just reemphasizing that podcasting does take a lot of time, and it is very time consuming. So when you have a very busy schedule, it's probably not the most ideal, but that's why it's important to have it just in case, like making notes on your marking your notes where you want to go back, and just going back to specific points where you might need extra, explanation. So that's all that I have for this section.
Another important point that we thought would be very crucial for a student's success as a pre-health student is to make sure you have a 4-year plan. And what that means is you should try to map out what classes you'll be taking when. And so definitely it's very important to get to know your academic advisor. So everybody has a counselor as an undergraduate student, so you have to know who that person is. And I would try to visit them every quarter to make sure that you're on the right track, or if there's any classes that you need to retake, when will be the best time to do that. Also, try to create a 4-year plan with them. So, depending on whether you want to get um, a minor or you want to get 2 majors, it can be pretty hectic. And a lot of colleges don't let you graduate if you have passed a certain amount of units. So you have to petition for that. So it's important that you know if you have to do that. The other important thing that a lot of pre-meds are confused about is that you do not need to be a science major to apply to medical school or be a successful applicant. I personally would recommend to not be a science major, just because you, I think, have more flexibility when it comes to planning your classes. And what that means is you can plan to take one difficult class, like one difficult physics class, and pair it with two easier, like literature or humanity classes that are not as time consuming as a physics class. And I think that gives you the best results when it comes to grades. Um, and then the other thing is that you can take the prereqs at your own pace. So if you want to do two science classes or one science class a quarter or a semester, then that's great because you're not pressured by having to complete your major to finish everything in 4 years. Um, Lastly is postbac is a last resort. And we've all done a postbac and we speak highly of it. It was a great program. It's definitely helped a lot of students gain admissions into medical school. However, um, postbac should be your last resort because it's a very expensive program, so you have to pay for it with loans, and it's extra time that you'll have to take from your path. Um, and I think if there's no need to do them, you should aim to not do them. I don't know if Elizabeth wants to chime in.
Yes. So I'll just pick up where what Crystal was talking about, which is the post-bac being a last resort. And I also did a post-bac. I did both the official and unofficial, and I also speak very highly of the programs, both of them. But with that being said, it was a lot of time and money invested. And just so that you get an idea, just because I wish somebody had really emphasized this when I was a first, second, even third year student, because and the next slide, just so that you know, is we'll talk about the importance of calculating your BCPM. But basically, just so that you get an idea, as a informal post-baccalaureate student at UCLA Extension, each class was costing us about $800 per class. And if your GPA is not where you want it to be, it's going to take, and especially if you were a science major, it's going to take a few classes for you to see that GPA going up. So multiply that 800 times whatever the number of classes you might have to be taking. And it's not to scare you if you're already in this position. If you're already in this position, it's completely doable. Both Crystal and I, as you saw from our background, have done a formal and informal post-bac program. So it's not impossible. In fact, we've both had great experiences with both programs. What we're both saying is just that if you don't have to do it, say if you're a first year, don't plan on it. Because I felt like when I was an undergraduate student, I was seeing a lot of my mentors get into, a lot of the people who I was seeing get into med school had done a post-bac first. So I kind of somewhere along the route maybe like saw that as an option, maybe if it's going to be okay, like a post-bac can help. But then also keep in mind that even to get into the post-bac, um, there's a GPA requirement, and these programs are very competitive. So just don't plan on it if you have time still to stay away from it. Although if you're in the position, great programs, both formal and informal. What else did Krista speak about here? So the 4-year plan, I was a Chicano Studies and Bio student as well. And I did that because it gave me, like Crystal said, the flexibility to take 2 science classes and a non-science class. And I had something that I loved both of my majors, but Chicano Studies was a little easier than, say, like the core chemistry classes for me personally. So it gave me a balance in my schedule. A 4-year plan will just let you see, when exactly you'll finish and make sure that you're on track. Again, you don't have to be a science major. I've had classmates who were not science majors and just completed the prerequisites at their own pace, so that helped a lot too, I think, from what I've heard. So I think we're done with this slide. I think Crystal, I saw that Crystal might have disconnected, but I see that she's still there. So we're going to move on to the next slide. This is what I was mentioning, the importance of calculating your BCPM. And I'm not familiar with all of the people who are on the call or your background. So I'm going to assume that, you know, there's some people maybe that don't know what this is, or maybe like first years, or we have a different audience. So I'm going to explain everything. The BCPM is just your science GPA, and this is the GPA. It's biology, chemistry, physics, and math. So that would be like your calculus. So when you apply to medical school, the medical schools look at that GPA separate from your GEs and your other classes as well. So for instance, I was a Chicano studies and also a biology major. So my BCPM came mostly from my bio requirements. So it didn't matter that I was, say, getting A's, straight A's in my Chicano studies. If I had a lower grade in my science classes, that's what they would look at. So know that those are two different GPAs. We have a note here to aim for at least a 3.5 in the sciences. Although this changes based on the background again. So if you have specific questions about your GPA and you'd like to meet with any one of us, we're more than happy to speak privately with you guys about this. There's another point. The next point is avoiding retaking classes unless you need to. When you apply to medical schools, they take the average of the grades. So, for instance, there were some classes where I had to choose between retaking or taking an upper division and doing better in them. And I think this is where this advice came from. I think some of my mentors suggested that I take a upper div and do better rather than spending more time for retaking a class that would then have been averaged, right? If you're thinking about applying to a post-bac programs, here's a note about the post-bacs require at least a 2.7 science GPA typically, right? So just to reemphasize, if you're taking GE classes or if you have a double major, your overall GPA might be I don't know, a 3.0, a 3.3, say. Doesn't mean that your science is that. Your science might still be below 2.7 in some cases. So then that's where you need to really plan ahead. We've included a link here for your BCPM. This is the link that both of us have used in the past, and it's a scary thing. It was a scary thing to do at first, and I put it off as an undergraduate for a long time, but this is something that I wish I would have been doing quarter after quarter, because it's like it motivates you, right, to keep improving your GPA and protecting this GPA, versus if you're hoping and wishing that everything is going to be fine, then when you finally check, you know, things might not be all that great. So I encourage every one of you guys, if you haven't already, to calculate your BCPM. Again, if you need help with this, reach out. We'll be providing our emails at the end of this presentation. And if you need help calculating your BCPM or have any questions as of how to do it, please reach out to any one of us, and we're more than happy to help with that. If Crystal, do you want to add anything to this slide?
Yeah. So another important thing to keep in mind is, even if your science GPA is bad right now, don't freak out. It's gonna be okay. A lot of medical schools tend to look at trends. So I think I was told, I've been told by a couple of mentors that upper trend speaks greatly of a student, more so than a straight line, because it means that you've struggled, that you've matured as a student, that you've become more responsible, that you've learned. And I think if you can reflect that in your writing, the growth that you've done and how you've improved your academic record, I think that that's a big plus. So having a lower BCPM GPA doesn't mean that you won't be able to get into medical school. It just means that you might have to do a little more work, and your writing should reflect your growth. But it's definitely doable. And then the other thing that I also want to emphasize is make sure you're calculating your BCPM after every quarter. You should know where you stand after every quarter to see if you need to take more classes or how many classes you should be taking, um, or if you're already where you want to be at. So I think all of that is important to keep in mind.
Just adding one last note there. Sorry, Crystal. Just Crystal's comment reminded me of this. If you use this calculator, you can project in the future as well. So say you don't have that 3.5 yet. And just so that we don't scare all of you guys, know that a 3.5 is ideal, right? But it's on a case-by-case basis. And if you're applying as a disadvantaged student, this might not be the case, right? Medical schools might be a little more lenient based on your status. So where I'm going is that you can project, say you want a 3.5, let's say that you want a 3.5 and you're a 3.0 now. You can keep adding classes on the Excel sheet until it indicates that you're at a 3.5. And if you can't reach that with the amount of classes that you have left to graduate, then you already know that you'll be needing a post-bac. So then you start planning for that. So another reason why this is very important, because it lets you plan ahead. Again, if you have questions, let us know at the end of the presentation or through email, and we'll go more into depth with this and walk you through this a little more. That was it for this slide.
So for letters of recommendation, I believe there's going to be another Together We Mentor that will go into depth regarding letters of recommendation, what to do, how to ask. But we just kind of wanted to take an overview of what they are, why they're important. So letters of recommendation can really set you apart from other applicants. From what I've been told by a lot of mentors is that it doesn't matter that much where they come from, but more so what they say. So again, and what that means is I much rather have a strong letter of recommendation from a professor than a chair of a department. Again, because they should reflect who you are as a person and what you're bringing into the school. So it's important to build relationships with your professors, and the way you do that is by going to office hours. So definitely asking for LORs 1 to 2 months in advance is ideal. So that gives your writer enough time to interview you or meet with you, ask you more questions. Also, you should prepare material for them to have. So what type of material? So what I mean is like your CV, your transcripts, also a brief description of what the program that you're applying to is and why you want to be part of the program. So whether it be medical school or a post-bac program, how will that benefit you? Also, when you're asking for letters of recommendation, when I was an undergrad, I used to have this question a lot. Like if I'm a first year or a second year, right now, I won't be applying to medical school until maybe 3 years from now. So how do I ask for letters of recommendations then? So that's when email updates are important. So I would say ask for letters of recommendation after every quarter that you like, had a class that you thought changed you or made an impact in you somehow, or if you had a meaningful relationship with a professor, I would probably ask for a letter of recommendation after that class ends. And you can ask them to send it to Interfolio. So Interfolio is kind of like this archive it's kind of like the iCloud, where you can store your letters of recommendation for free. They only charge you a fee if you need to mail them out. So once you start your application process, then you'll have to pay a fee. I think it's like 50 or 60 for a 2-year subscription. But your letters can be stored there forever. So pretty much if you ask for a letter of recommendation after the quarter is over, then your letter will be stored there. And if you constantly send emails like every quarter to a professor that you like, and you're like, hey, like this is what I've been doing, I'm volunteering here, like I'm a sophomore already, I'm about to apply, then in their fall you can send those letters, email those letters back to your professor so they can just update it. But they'll have something to go off from. And I wish I would have known this when I was an undergraduate student. So I think this is what I would do if you're a first year or second year, third year, and not thinking of applying to medical school yet. Do you want to add anything, Elizabeth?
Yes. Just adding on to what Crystal already says, everything that she said is also what I recommend. But I don't know if you mentioned it or if I missed it, but how to approach a professor. And usually when I've asked for letters of recommendation, I've waited for the end of class, for the end of a semester, to approach the professor either after class or in office hours. And office hours is kind of tricky because you have to stay behind, or there's a lot of other people trying to ask questions, right? But I found that after class is a good time, after everybody has really, left the area, and you have a private moment with the professor. You can also set up a meeting, something like, hi, Professor X, like I really enjoyed this class, and I was wondering if you might be willing to write a letter of recommendation for me, and if so, might you be willing to set up a meeting where we can speak about this in more detail? And hopefully, he or she says yes, and then that's where you take everything that Crystal had mentioned. You should show up with your CV, transcripts, and show up ready to tell them about what you're involved in and why you want to go into medical school. It's like almost like treat it almost like an interview, because this person's going to be writing you a letter. That's if you're closer to the point. I don't think it hurts if you do it if you're a first, second, third year. If you do it then, and then like Crystal mentioned, update this professor on a quarterly or yearly basis to see how you're growing, so that he or she can see how you're growing. That's what I recommend there. Let me see if I had any other points. I think that was it. That was it for this slide. We're moving on now to extracurricular activities, and basically it goes back to scheduling. I think that scheduling, I'm a very big fan of planners and scheduling. So I think that that's an important component for every student to have, whether you like it digitally or physical copies of planners, because as I was mentioning earlier, if you have a hour-to-hour block schedule of your full week that shows your full week Monday through Sunday, academics are first. We emphasize the importance of your BCPM GPA, both because it will save you time and money, and you want to do this once, and you don't want it to take you longer, right? So BCPM is very important. So I would recommend that on your planner, you schedule off your time. You'll get to know yourself better as a student, and you'll know how much time it takes you to study a section, whatever section you're going over for each class. So based on that, I would recommend that you block off that time on your planner. On top of going to class for each class, you should have like a few hours each day, or on alternate days throughout the week, to study or review your notes, right, for each class. And then once you have that blocked, so now you have class, study time, office hours blocked off, work if you have to work, right? And now you analyze your schedule and see if you have time for extracurricular activities. On some quarters, you might have more time than other quarters, but that's how you commit without, I guess, overcommitting and jeopardizing your GPA. So I would um, really take a look at that schedule and see if you have the time to volunteer. Volunteering is very important, I think, as a pre-health student. I was part of CCM, or Chicanos Latinos for Community Medicine at UCLA, and really this organization is really what um, made me want to do medicine, really, for the reasons that I want to do medicine and serving the medically underserved communities in our areas. That and connecting this to my own experiences growing up. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of value in joining organizations, because it'll really, I think, show you why you want to do medicine, and it'll give you something to talk about passionately during your interviews and during your medical school applications. So I really recommend that you guys join extracurricular activities that you guys are passionate about. But to do it, I recommend that you do it cautiously, because you can't overcommit to the point where your GPA is going to suffer, right? But there's ways of doing it, like the planning, like, like if you have your schedule laid out, you can do it smartly, I guess, by having it in front of your schedule, in front of you, and knowing when and for how long you can volunteer. We have another point here to think about: the club organization's advisor. Do you know them personally? Basically, you probably want to get to know them or have them see your work. They'll probably know your work based on them being the advisor, but this is something to think about, because you might want to ask that advisor for a letter of recommendation for medical school. So keep that in mind when you meet your advisor, or when you talk to your advisor, maybe even a couple of months or years prior to you applying to medical school or professional school. You might want to ask if that's something that they might be willing to do for you, writing you the letter of recommendation. It's good to know and plan who you're going to ask for that letter, so that come the time you're not scrambling or trying to figure out who you're going to ask. And best scenarios, you already have those formed connections, and you can easily go back to them and say something like, hey, you remember I had asked prior if you might be willing to write a letter of recommendation for me. So the time has come. I'm now applying. I'm very excited. Would you support me? Another point that just came to mind now is kind of being polite about this, in the sense of allowing at least, I would say, at least a month at the least, for these advisors to write those letters of recommendation, because they have their own schedules. Typically, they're busy. So if you want a strong letter, and just to be polite, I think the right way of doing it is at least a month in advance. At least, if you can give them more time, you give them more time. Moving on to the next point: clinical experiences. What's your interaction with patients? Do you get to interact with physicians, and journaling? So when you apply to medical school, I can't speak more about other professional schools, but I imagine that it's probably similar. When you apply to these positions, you write a little blurb about each meaningful experience that you've had. So there's spaces for you to write about extracurricular activities, maybe, right? So medical schools like to see that you've interacted with patients, physicians, and naturally you'll do this if you're working with medically inclined organizations. Here we have a note about journaling, because I think it's important for you to jot down your ideas, how you felt, what impacted you after each time you volunteer. Say, for CCM, I was part of LSHP specifically, and we did a lot of health fairs in different communities. Say that something would have struck me specifically, you typically remember also, but I think it just would help if you jotted down how this experience made you feel, how it changed you, so that when when it comes time for you to apply or write about it more formally, you have your journal to review and to go off of. Um, Going off of this as well, every time, again, I'm emphasizing because this is another thing that I wish I would have known as an undergraduate student, or I wish I would have done rather, because I think I heard it, but I was like, like it'll be fine, and it's harder to remember specifically what dates you were involved in something later, like 5 years later, right? Then if you're volunteering, say at a clinic today, and you start today, I would have a log, especially for those of you who are younger students joining us today. I would recommend just printing out a log and writing down like your experience. I think we have an example in the following slides, but basically just writing down your experience, a little blurb, something like this for each skill that you're involved in. And say you started today, 5 years from today, you won't remember if it was January or March. So you'll have to, it's easiest if you just have something like this going, and it'll make your application cycle so much easier. Something that I hadn't seen until recently. Like, I think that this is, for example, the experience type, it tells you that it was a research lab. It goes into detail, how many hours you volunteered per week. So it allows you to have a very organized layout of what you want to present to medical schools. And I'll let Crystal add on if you have anything to add, Crystal.
Yeah, so for me it's just to know, I guess, like the type of activity that you do doesn't, like, don't disqualify non-clinical, non-healthcare related activities, because I think a lot of times committees like to know that you're a well-rounded individual and that you dab in other things. So definitely do what you love. So if you love teaching, then do that. Or if you love research, then do that. Don't do it because you have to do it, because then it shows. And I think once you interview, people can really tell what you're passionate about. And a lot of my mentors kept telling me, make sure you show your passion as opposed to just telling people what your passion is. And I think the volunteer activities is really an area where that's true. If you're passionate about a specialty, but then there's no work, like you've never volunteered in that specialty, or you've never, volunteer in that community, then you can't really speak to that passion because your work doesn't really show it. So that's another, I think, important point. And then in terms of the 15 activities, so in the medical school application, there's a space for you to add 15 extracurricular activities that you've done in the past. You don't need 15. I've met a few people that have applied with 7, 10, um, or less than that, and they've been very successful applicants. Um, but this is what typically the that space requires you to write. So, like Elizabeth mentioned, you have to write the name of the activity, the person, the contact person, contact phone number, and kind of like an activity description of pretty much what you did, like your duties, everything you help organized. And then there's a space for you to indicate if this activity was a most meaningful activity. You can only choose 3 activities out of those 15 activities to be most meaningful. And what that means is that you'll get extra, I don't know how many characters you get extra, but you get additional characters for you to write why this activity was most meaningful to you. Like, why did it change you, or um, why, or what you learned from this activity. So I think journaling can really help you in terms of deciding which activity was more meaningful to you and why. And also during interviews, I think they'll ask you, a lot of medical schools will ask about your 15 activities, um, or whatever you did. And I think being able to come up with an answer is journaling helps you a lot when in terms of coming up with an answer and coming up with concrete examples of why this activity was so important to you. And let me see. So moving on to the next slide, I think networking and conferences are crucial. Again, I didn't know this when I was an undergraduate student, but there's so much knowledge that you can get from just going to conferences alone. So definitely, I think Mi Mentor is a great platform for you to look at what conferences are coming up, or webinars, to learn more about the admissions process. There's also like programs that you can do, like postbac programs in California, or research intensive programs for the summer if you're an undergrad. So definitely keep in mind what type of conferences you like to attend. There's conferences for everything. So if you're a minority student, there's conferences for that. If you don't know, like if you want to explore medical schools that are out of state, this is also a great opportunity for you to do that. And there's a video that Together We Mentor we did in the past. It's called Conferencing 101, which pretty much I went into detail on like what a conference is, how to network, how to get mentors. So if you have questions, not sure how to do that, then I advise you to go check that video out. It's on our YouTube channel. Networking is also very important. I think it's great to meet other people, and meet classmates that are on your path, because I think as first generation students, a lot of the information we get is from each other, and that's kind of like our support group. So I think conferences are a great way to make friends. Open houses. So an open house is pretty much when medical school says, okay, we're gonna give out information on our admissions process, our financial aid, like pretty much everything you need to know to become a student here. So that's an open house, and I would definitely encourage you to attend those, either virtually or in person, if whatever medical school you're interested in has them. I know that now with the current situation, there's a lot of webinars happening for medical schools that are trying to talk about their admission process and how the admission process will change now that MCAT dates are delayed. Also talk to alumni. So, people that went to whatever medical school you're interested in. Again, Mi Mentor is a great platform for you to find alumni, or current medical students that can help guide you when it comes to applying to medical school. And yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything else, Elizabeth.
Yes, just one quick point here. If anything else, also conferences are very, or I found conferences to be very refreshing, because oftentimes the guest speakers who they have are, for instance, they're probably more, so if it's a minority conference, you'll probably find doctors who have made it, who are also from disadvantaged backgrounds. And when I went to these types of conferences, I found that to be very refreshing, because it really showed me, like if I was struggling academically, or having a hard time in a particular class, and I went to one of these conferences, it was like I can do this. They did it, I can do it. And it's very inspirational, really. And I came back very refreshed. So like Crystal, I would also recommend going to these conferences whenever you have a chance to. Again, planning it out, knowing in advance that you're going to go to a conference and spend the whole day here. So studying in advance as well. I recommend Crystal's Conferencing 101 video. Here she also spoke about dress code. If you have any questions about what to wear or what's appropriate to wear at these conferences, I think she goes into detail in the other video. So you guys should check that out. I guess this is a little redundant here because we've talked about this a lot throughout the presentation. This is how important we think planning is. I think I already touched upon most of this throughout throughout our presentation, but basically adding classes, office hours, work, extracurricular activities, and study time in your planner so that you know how and where your time is allocated. And to-do lists are very helpful because you cross out whatever you've done in the block of time that you've allotted for whatever that is. And crossing things off is just, that feeling of, okay, I got another thing done is very satisfying. And it, for me at least, it made me want to keep going. So this helped a lot, and I wish I would have used this method earlier on in my years as a student. So you use the planner and the to-do list together. I was just reading off the slide, and use allocated time to work towards crossing your things off your list. So if you guys have any questions about this or setting up your planner, let us know. We can help with this. I can speak a little bit about financial budgeting as well. So this was another thing that I wish I would have known as an undergraduate student. A lot of the financial aid that you get will probably be from scholarships, grants, or loans. And remembering that the loan money that you borrow needs to be paid off will help you, I guess, like budget off better, because it's sometimes easy to forget, right? That you'll one day you're gonna have to pay these off. So here's an example: 6 months after graduating, if you don't defer your payments based on the amount of money that you took out, you're going to have to pay it back, and you're going to have to pay it back with interest after interest starts accruing. And these payments are not cheap. If throughout your undergraduate years, say you take out $20,000, which is quote unquote not much, right, for 4 years, but you might end up paying a $200 to $300 monthly payment on student loans, because not only are you paying the principal, but also the interest on this. What I started doing later was keeping track of where I spend my money. I before this, I've never taken a budgeting class or done budgeting, not only academically, but in general. And I think it really helps to know where your money is going. Cash spending helps because you physically give, you're physically spending money, and it helps to keep track of where the money is going. Again, I think that the point that I'm trying to get across here is to minimize the spending, because it'll give you more peace of mind later down the road when, say, you're doing a post-bac and you have to pay $800 for a class, and you're paying and you have other expenses at the same time, right? So think about this now. I hope a lot of you guys are still younger students that can truly benefit from this. If you have if you're taking out, if you have scholarship money right now or grant money, then I think that, and if you budget adequately, then later down the road, if you happen to need a post-bac program, you'll be less stressed financially about taking out even more loans with possibly higher interest rates. Another note that I want to make here is that for the post-bac programs, oftentimes it's harder to get loans from the government. So you end up taking out personal loans, which have up to 11% interest rate. If you're lucky and you have good credit, or you have a cosigner who has good credit, that interest rate can be lower. But if you don't have, stellar credit and or someone to ask, then you might be stuck. I've heard up to 10, 11% interest rate, which is a lot on a, say, $14,000 tuition for a year with a postbac. We have another video where we talk about more about this posted on Mi Mentor, comparing and talking about how much of unofficial or versus official postbac will cost you. So going back to the financial budgeting, knowing that these programs are expensive, even applying to medical school is expensive, taking the MCAT is expensive, paying for a course is expensive. If you plan ahead and allocate your money correctly, I think that you'll have a better, I guess you'll have more peace of mind later down the years. And this is something, again, that I think I wish I would have learned earlier about how to, or I guess consider more heavily, knowing that the whole process would be expensive and how expensive, which is why I like to talk numbers and share with you guys how much really a postbac you're looking at just for tuition alone, about $14,000, not including food money, rent money, expense money, bills if you have to pay. So if you're saving, I wish I would have started a savings fund for my years after undergraduate, when I was an undergraduate, and that way I would have been putting money away for my later years. Something that I didn't do, but I hope that you guys can walk away with that today. I now am very aware of where my money is going, and being smarter about how I save my money for, say now in my case, for things like that I have in mind are, if I, when I apply to medical school, I will need money for that. For interviews as well, you need to fly out if you get interviews out of state, even in state, if you have to, travel money. So I think all professional schools, health professional schools are similar, but for medical school, it's a very, very pricey process. So I urge you guys to budget accordingly, even in the earlier years. I hope you guys now have this in mind and will be aware of this through your years. And I hope that this helps a lot of you guys. Another thing is that when you graduate from undergraduate, from your undergraduate years, I know that, and maybe Crystal can chime in on this later, but I know that this for the 4 years or 5 years, whatever number of years you take to complete your undergraduate career, they'll give you a max amount of loans that you can take out from the government. Although even the unsubsidized, which means that the interest starts accruing, even those types of loans will probably, and don't quote me on this because obviously I'm not a financial aid expert, but just off of my experience, I think that even unsubsidized loans or subsidized loans, more so even, are better than later taking out a personal loan, which can have a higher interest rate. So what I'm trying to get at here is and consult this with a financial aid expert, of course, or maybe find somebody who can tell you how much interest you'll have to pay on this money. But especially for those of you who are going or planning on doing a postbac program right out of undergrad, maybe you already know, which goes back to the importance of knowing your BCPM and planning ahead is important, because now say you're a fourth year and you know for sure I'm applying to a postbac next year, and I think that I will get in, and I'm planning on getting in. So what I would do in that case, if you have more loan money available for you to take out, and I didn't do it, but I think I've had friends tell me that this is something that you can probably do, is maybe take out that loan money and don't spend it, save it, and you might be able to use this towards your post-bac and unofficially, right? Use this towards your postbac, and it helps because I think that those have a lower interest rate. Again, I didn't do this personally, but I think that I've heard of this out there, so I didn't do it. But if you could probably ask around, maybe people who you know have done it, maybe look more into this if this is something that you might consider. The last point on here is EBT. This is something that I didn't know before as well, but as a student, you easily qualify unless I guess your family contribution is higher. I'm not sure if that disqualifies you or not, but for most students, I think it's fairly easy to apply for EBT. And they give you about $200 a month in fresh groceries, so you can spend that money for that, which goes back to financial budgeting, because that's $200 a month that you can be saving from loan money. If you don't have to take it out, don't take it out. It's expensive. Interest rates are hard to deal with later because your debt just keeps growing. So if you can avoid taking out loans, unless, I mean, what I mentioned earlier is an exception, right? If you're planning on doing a post-bac program, your fourth or fifth year before graduating, I'd look into that. I haven't done it, so I probably shouldn't speak more about it, but that's just something to have on your radar. But other than that, in the previous years, you want to keep your loans to a minimum, and this EBT option can help. Crystal, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I think you touched on everything. The only last point that I wanted to add is just be careful with credit cards. I think as a student, it's easy to just get a credit card and um, buy, things that you don't necessarily have to pay right away. But know that um, your interest also accumulates, and then it gets harder to pay them off. And again, like Elizabeth mentioned later on, if you have to budget for the cost of a postbac or the cost of applying to medical school, which is really, really expensive, then it gets hard to pay for both. And I would also start budgeting now. So, just looking at AAMC, going to the AAMC website and seeing how much the MCAT cost and how much primary and secondaries cost. I think that should give you a good idea to how much you should aim to save before you apply. Um, and of course, there's also the FAP, which is the waiver that low income students get from AAMC. However, that's also given to students on a case by case basis, and they not only look at your financial situation as a student, but they also look at your parents' financial situation, even if they don't help you, even if you're an independent student, like 26, 30 years old, they're still going to look at your parents' information. And if yours and your parents' information, financial information, goes over a certain amount, then you won't be able to get that waiver, whether or not they help you pay for medical school applications or not. So, all of those are things that you should keep in mind if you're thinking of committing yourself to a career in medicine.
Sorry, just one last point there. On that slide is YouTube. It's a great resource, not only for, like Crystal was mentioning, for studying purposes and finding videos that tailor to your classes that you're taking. I don't know if we mentioned before specific. I think she talked about what is it, AAMC or Khan Academy for the MCAT, but YouTube is also a great resource for, say you're taking a genetics class and there's a specific topic that you don't understand. Go to YouTube, look for a video that best helps you understand the material. But the reason why I'm bringing it up now is because financial budgeting, if that's something that you haven't done in the past, like personally, I hadn't done it growing up, or I hadn't learned how to do it from my parents or at home. So what I found is like looking up videos on how to budget on YouTube. So you can do that to help you see methods. There's a lot of very great budgeters, financial advisors out there that post free information. Even if you guys are on Instagram, there are people on Instagram who are very good at like saving money, finding ways to save money. And I think all of that will help you have, say, a savings account. Even your first year, if you want to become a doctor, you know that you'll need to take the MCAT. Have a little envelope or a little savings account in the bank for you for your MCAT, for MCAT courses, or have another savings account for travel expenses for interviews, another one for, in the case that you would need a post back. I think it's very smart to do it. The earlier, the better. But that was my last point. Use YouTube for financial budgeting as well. It can really help.
So at this time, we can go ahead and answer. I guess these are general questions that we came up with, that we've had from mentees in the past. But you're welcome to type your questions on the chat, and we'll make sure to address those. So I'll start with the first one. So the first question says, do I need to be a science major to complete my pre-med requirements? As we mentioned before, the answer is no. You can be any major as long as you complete the prereqs to apply to medical school. And you can find the prereqs on the AAMC website. Then you're fine. That's all you need. And like we mentioned before, I would highly, highly, highly advise that you, do something that you're passionate about, even if that is not in the sciences. So if you want to be a Chicano major, that's a great choice, because that allows you flexibility when it comes to combining difficult classes with less time commitment classes. Elizabeth, do you want to answer the next question?
Yes. Do you recommend any books or other sources to learn more efficiently? One book that comes to mind, if we have any first years or people still taking calculus here with us today, I would recommend Schaum's outline for pre-calc. Even if for the MCAT, I think the trig and the way that they present it, I remember loving the book and being like, wow, why didn't I come across this earlier? Or, like or I think I was presented with it. I forgot if it was through my first year calc teacher, but I thought this could have helped for even high school. So Schaum's outline for calculus is one that comes to mind. Also, other resources to learn more efficiently. I just saw a comment come in that asks if we have apps that you recommend to organize ourselves and try to juggle classes, work, MCAT studying. So I misread the question. We'll go back to that question, but that question reminded me of Notability. So going along this question as well of other resources to learn more efficiently. Later down the road, I started using Notability on my iPad, and that really helped because with this app, you can just upload your notes, PDF notes, which students usually have. I mean, teachers usually post, professors usually post PDFs of your lecture slides, right? So you upload these. It allows you to record the lecture, and it also allows you to annotate. Of course, if you have an iPad and a pen, you can do that more easily. But Notability, you can also do through on a computer, so you can do it even if you don't have an iPad. An iPad was helpful though when I was taking a lot of classes, and I just divided my classes, especially throughout the post-bac. I divided the courses based on the class name, and then under each section it lets you add each like lecture 1, 2, 3, 4 chronologically, so it's really easy for you to go over them later, listen to the audio, mark any questions. And what I did later was also on an iPad side by side, have my lecture notes open and then have a blank page open, and then you go through the lecture slides and create an outline like what Crystal was mentioning, and that helped a lot because not only was I looking at the material once, but then I was looking at it again when I reviewed my outline, and if I had questions, I can look side by side at these notes. So to sum it up, Booksham's outline for calculus is maybe there's more. If I come up with more, I'll comment on the comment box, and then other resources. Two things that came to mind was the Shams outline and Notability. If Crystal wants to add more, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, so books that I would recommend for learning, I think there's a really good one that I've heard from a lot of medical students as well. It's called Make It Stick. And it pretty much gives you, again, more content on how to actively learn and kind of like memorize as you're sitting in class. And there's another book called A Mind for Numbers. I don't remember the authors, but I'm sure if you look up the titles, you'll probably find them. And A Mind for Numbers, it kind of teaches you tricks on how to study better and how to learn more efficiently. There's a website that a friend of mine recommended through, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Coursera, which is like a website where you can take courses for free. And there's this course, it's called Learning How to Learn. And it's taught by this, I think she's, I want to say a UC Davis or a UC San Diego professor. And she pretty much teaches you how to learn. And she's the person that recommended this book, A Mind for Numbers. It's a great course. It's like you don't take the course for a grade or anything. You can pretty much just audit the course, just watch the videos, do the exercises if you want. I think I just watched the videos and I read the book. And I think it's a really good course to teach people that even if you're struggling in sciences right now, it's not because you're not smart enough, but more because you don't know how to do it. So this professor is great. I think she used to be a humanities professor and then she switched over to become an engineer, something like that. So I think I would definitely recommend that course and those two books if you can get them. So the next question is, what if I already failed, barely passed a few pre-med courses? So that's okay. That's not the end of the world. We're all been there. Um, I think again, as I mentioned before, it's all about an upper trend. So if you can show medical schools that you've had this pitfalls in the past, but you're able to learn from them and you can grow from there, and now you're a mature student, that's all that matters. I think medical schools are concerned. They're only concerned, or from what I've been told by admission officers, is that they look at metrics not so much because they think that an A is going to make a great doctor. It's more so because they want to make sure that you can handle the curriculum. So I think that if you can show that you can handle the curriculum by doing a postbac or by taking a fifth year, or showing an upper trend, if you're still like first, second, or third year, I think that would be ideal. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to chime in.
I think that you covered mostly all for that question about what if I already failed or really passed a few of your pre-med courses. Again, if it's happened, it happens, and you're not alone. There are a lot of students who are struggling. We don't all have the same backgrounds, and I think that is okay. And basically, if you're there, you're not alone. I know it can sometimes feel overwhelming. So I also want to use this space to tell you it's going to be okay. I think that come application cycle, your passion for why you want to become a doctor will show. And I think that's important to doctors as well, aside from, I mean, not to doctors, to medical schools. As well, aside from a stellar GPA, I think that your reason for going into medicine is important, and what you want to do as a physician is important. So keep that in mind, and don't let that stop you. You can always fix it. I think Crystal mentioned post-bac and formal. There are ways to and it might not be easy to raise your GPA, but it's possible. And you can do it. That's it for that question. I'll move on to the next one. Where do I look for tutoring? Most large universities have centers, tutoring centers. For us at UCLA, it was AAP. I'm sure that all the other campuses have something similar. Talk to your advisors, and sometimes it's free tutoring. In our case, it was, and it's tutoring by students who have taken the course and who have done good on these courses. So you have a lot to learn from them. One thing that I would warn against, though, is, again, as I did for office hours, I would warn against going to these tutoring sessions unprepared, because you're only going to, I guess, feel like, or if this is what I felt like I was further behind if I went to tutoring and it wasn't, and I wasn't up to date, right? Then I was like, damn, like this is one more thing that I don't know. So with that being said, they are very helpful because they're by students who have taken the class. They're very, very helpful, but go prepared. And I think that made a big difference for me later down the road. So that's something that I recommend. Crystal, do you have anything to add here?
I think definitely just echoing what Elizabeth said, look for tutoring on campus. A lot of colleges have some type of program for disadvantaged students that you can join. And that's a great resource for you guys to get extra support in a course that's difficult. Also, YouTube. YouTube is great. I think I didn't, when I was an undergrad, I didn't see the value in YouTube, but it's amazing. So definitely check it out. Khan Academy is amazing. They cover every subject you can think of, especially general prereqs. And again, I would definitely recommend to study, to look at MCAT videos that correlate to whatever class you're taking, because it's just like they simplify it. They just tell you what you need to know, and how to apply it. And I think had I known that in the past, it would have made my studying easier. Um, and yeah, so that's all I have for that question.
And
Oh, go ahead.
just adding to that, Crystal, sorry, you brought up a good point about YouTube for any other classes. I think we've said this already too, but when I was in undergrad, as an undergraduate student, I was afraid. I think that the reason why I stayed away from YouTube, which I shouldn't have had because it proved itself to be very useful in the future, but the reason why I stayed away from it before, and in case that this is the case for you, any of you guys on today, I was scared that the way that the professor was teaching it would be different from what YouTube had to present, or that, I don't know, would differ. I was hesitant about using YouTube for that reason. But the way that I would do it is, like, say a genetics class, you guys are going over Punnett squares, specifically different topics like that. I would literally just type that into YouTube and find whatever works for you. AK Lectures, he helped me a lot through undergrad. The way that he presents it is very visual and very slow, but yet very concise. So I'd recommend that for you guys if you guys want to take note. It's a guy on YouTube. His channel, I think, is called AK Lectures. So very, very useful YouTube. I second everything Crystal had to say already. I think, Crystal, let's go now into the questions. I see that we have a few questions up. Do you want to go through those together?
Yeah. So if you want, I'll go through the first one, and you can take the next one.
Yeah.
So the first question says, are there any books that have been really impactful towards the way you think, or ones that have gave you a deeper insight purpose in the health field? So I have a few books that I really liked. So there's three that I would recommend. So Becoming Dr. Q. So Dr. Quinones, if you don't know who that is, he was a farm worker, and he went to Harvard Medical School, I believe, and became a neurosurgeon. So it's a great book, very inspirational. So I would definitely recommend it. There's also Black Man in a White Coat. I don't remember the author, but I remember thinking that it was a great book. And there's also Medical Apartheid, which is not like a novel or like a biography, but it's more, it talks about the injustices that have happened through medicine, and how, so for example, I don't know if you know, but you know, the doctor that's responsible for making many discoveries in the OB field, he did a lot of that on black slaves, and that it kind of like talks about the history of that and how, like, you know, how um, that was very negative, and you know how African Americans and Latinos have been um, oppressed by the health field system. So I think it's a great book. So definitely check it out. Elizabeth, you want to go to the next question?
Hi, yes. So the next question, and I second a lot of the books that Crystal was talking about. Becoming Dr. Q is one of my favorite as well. So how come you all decided to do a formal postbac versus staying at extension? Also, what are you all up to now that you're done with the postbac? So to answer that, and we can probably both chime in here, but I can start. So I decided to do a formal path, postbac versus extension. Okay, so I came to a point where I had taken most of the courses offered at extension, and the diversity of courses were limited at that point, and I probably could have found a few others that I hadn't taken. If you're in this boat now, I think that what I would have done as an alternative could have also been looking at other campuses. I think we started doing that like UC Berkeley. I think they're on the semester, so it might be a little trickier because then I guess like when you apply, that's just more transcripts to request. But that would have been another option. But I decided to do the formal postbac instead of just staying at extension for that reason that I just mentioned, the availability of courses, and B, because I was looking for more guidance in the process. In navigating the whole application cycle, which the postbac was really good at doing. As part of the postbac program, we do get a full course for the MCAT. So they help us there. They help us prepare there. And they also have a writing specialist. So they help you through the writing, the 15 activities that I had and never thought about before this point. They helped us brainstorm as of how to present and how to best write these. I think I did it for the mentorship and the guidance, the structure of the program. The informal postbac is a little more, it's great. Both programs are great. I recommend both highly. But the informal is less structured, definitely, than the formal postbac program. And ultimately, those were the reasons why I chose to do the formal program after the informal. And then what am I up to now? I am, so you can take the MCAT with the cohort, and if you need more time or if circumstances change, then you can take more time as well. After, I'm currently studying for the MCAT, and I will go from there after. So although, so if any of you guys who are also wondering, the postbac program does have a timeline, but ultimately they work on a case-by-case basis with the student, and you talk to your advisor and do what you think is best for you ultimately. And I decided to study this time around for the MCAT to optimize my application. Crystal, do you have anything else to add?
No, so pretty much my reasons are very similar to Elizabeth's. I also decided to do a formal postbac because I wanted to have a little more structure when it came to applying for the for medical school, and also they offer an MCAT class. So I thought that paying alone for that class would have been very expensive. So I really wanted to take advantage of that. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do the formal postbac. Again, I speak highly of both programs. I think they both helped me very much. In terms of what I'm doing now, I'm also studying for the MCAT. I wanted to take extra time to prepare as much as I could for the MCAT. So that's what I'm currently doing. So moving on to the next question, what app do you recommend to organize ourselves and try to juggle classes, work, MCAT studying? So for me, um, love Google Calendar. I think it syncs very well to all your devices. So I usually do that and I divide my calendar by weeks. Um, whether I'm in the quarter system or semester, I think it works great. And there's another app that I use to make sure to track how many hours I'm actually studying. It's called Focus. I think it's a paid app. I believe it's like $3, but it's great because it tracks the time that you're actually studying. And for it to work, you have to put your phone face down, so you really get to see how many hours you've done of actual studying. So that app is definitely very eye opening, because you might think that you're studying more hours than you actually are. So I would recommend those two. Elizabeth, I don't know if you have any recommendations.
So I know Crystal mentioned the Google Calendars. I don't like Google Calendars myself because I'm more of a paper pen person. So as I've been mentioning throughout the presentation, I like it's not particularly an app, but I make my own planners. So I print out sheets that have my calendar from like whatever time I will be starting my days based on what I'm doing. So when I was a student, I guess like fall quarter, what's the earliest I had class? What was I going to do before class? I allot time for and space for that. And then I go like, say, typically what time do I go to bed? So I'll end my schedule there. So I like it because it's very customized to my schedule, and it's not like the ones at the store or like Staples and stuff. Like they usually end at 5. That doesn't work for me. So I make my own. And like I mentioned, I have a to-do list usually for every day or every week. I've done it both. Both work great. And basically, that's how I keep myself organized with classwork, MCAT studying, everything I need to do. And it keeps me accountable because I go back and I look at that to-do list, and if I'm like, like getting off topic, I'm like, okay, like it's time to focus because or else I'm not going to get that done with the allotted time that I have. And if you have work, then you need to think about that as well. Extracurricular activities. If you follow your schedule, it makes it a lot easier and less stressful because then if the more you get done within that allotted time, the more quote unquote free time you have to do things that you want to, like volunteer or hang out with your friends and family, anything that you want to do. It opens up space to do that in a responsible way because then you got your academics done, but then I guess you get to enjoy that free time more than if you're just having free time, but you're not done with your to-do list. So that's what I would recommend for organization purposes. I'll go on to the next question, which says, what opinions do you have of taking prereq courses in a community college versus a four-year college? So I myself have not taken community college classes, but from what I've heard, if you're starting off at a community college, I think that it's not a bad idea. The only thing that I guess would worry me with recommending community college right after high school for anyone based on only what I've heard from friends and mentors is that sometimes core classes might be impacted and it might be harder to enroll in these courses. And I'm talking specifically, I have a few friends and classmates who did community college at Santa Monica College in LA. And I think that it's kind of sometimes hard to get into these impacted courses and it takes you longer. That's one thing that would worry me, but I think that maybe talk to people who are in community college or even counselors and see how it is for each college or for whatever college you're trying to enroll in. It might be different. I know LA is very populated, so this can differ, right? That's one thing that would worry me. Taking the core classes there in general, I don't think there's a problem with that. I don't see a problem with that, other than you're saving money going back to budgeting for 2 years, right? It's cheaper to take classes at a community college versus four-year college if you're very, I guess, diligent and on top of things, and you uh, take the responsibility of meeting with your advisors, and you're very proactive about all that, to the point where falling behind is not a risk for you, then I think it's a great option. Community college, taking 2 years of community college and then doing the last two at a university, I don't think it's a bad idea. There's also the case where a lot of people take community, or sorry, I've heard the question phrased differently. I'm not sure which you meant, but I'll address both. The first one being the first 2 years, the second one doing an informal postbac at a community college. I've heard of people doing that as well. We both, Crystal and I, did our informal postbac program at UCLA Extension. As I mentioned, the classes were expensive there, much more so than if we would have gone to a community college. In that order, I think that's why I didn't pursue the informal postbac program at a community college, because I was fearful of going from a university level curriculum to a two-year college or junior college curriculum. I wasn't sure if this would impact the way that admissions saw my upward trend. I wasn't sure if it would take from the validity of it, because I had taken, I think when I considered community college, I had already started taking classes at Extension. So I think really it was just easier for me to continue taking classes at Extension because it was closer and I had already started. And also I worried that the rigor of the classes would be different, or the admissions would think that it was different. So I stayed away from it. But I think I've heard of people taking their informal at a community college. Is better if you just start there and just continue. If you guys have more specific questions, maybe email us and we can talk about that, and maybe redirect you to some people who we might know who took the community college route for a postbac, quote unquote, informal postbac rather. So that's my opinion on that. Crystal, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, so just echoing what Elizabeth said, I think if you're a community college student right now, that's great. Finish all your prereqs, you're saving money. If you're already at a four-year college, I don't know. I don't think I would probably go back to community college because, again, I've been told by many mentors to not do it because I guess like you're already at a four-year college, so you should keep at a four-year college. Like whatever you do, your unofficial postbac should be at a four-year college. That's what I've been told. I also didn't take any community college classes after graduating UCLA because, again, I was already at a four-year college, so I just kept with UCLA Extension. But if you have any more questions, we're happy to redirect you to someone that might have done that. So moving on to the next question. So would you mind talking more about the postbac application process, how competitive it is, how to become more competitive? So this is kind of like a loaded question because there's like so much information about postbacs. And there is a video that we already did a webinar on comparing both formal and informal postbac programs on YouTube. So definitely go check that out. But in short, I would say the postbac application process is very competitive. There's just a lot of applicants, and like it's a great program because it's very comprehensive, but it's just very competitive. So definitely making sure that you have the GPA requirements that can help. Making sure that you have everything already set, ready to go. So the whole point of a postbac program, formal postbac programs, want to help students who are ready to apply, and the only thing that they're lacking is science GPAs. Like the science GPA needs to be improved. but everything else is there. So ideally, before you apply to a formal postbac program, uh, enhancer program, because there's different types, um, you already are set to go. And as soon as you finish the postbac program, you can take your MCAT and then apply. That's the goal. So with that, definitely having your GPA, your BCPM GPA ready, or at least have the required one for the program that you're applying to. Having your 15 activities or whatever activities ready to go, that's also a plus. And also, I think just having the experience, having the letters of rec ready to go. So all of that can make you a very strong applicant. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to add anything else to my answer.
Yes, I think everything that Crystal said, I second all of that. And just to rephrase, just pretend like if there was that the GPA, if that was the only aspect of your application that was missing, and say like today you're ready to apply if you had that GPA. I think that that's a good place to be when you're applying to postbac programs. With that being said, though, I do know of people who have had barely the 2.7 that they require, and have gotten in with that. And I know people who have had like a 3 point, I don't know, like threes or 3.4, I think I've even heard of, and are still trying to get into a postbac and have successfully made it into a postbac. So I think that it's also, I guess, why you want to be part of a postbac. For us, like we mentioned, it was to have that mentorship. Maybe the person with a higher GPA between a 3.0 and a 3.3, maybe they wanted that mentorship, and maybe they communicated that very clearly during the interviews or during their writing piece that they submitted. For us, it was more guidance, and um, like I wanted the guidance that came with it. So I made sure to communicate that in my interview as well as in my statements that I submitted. If you have any more specific questions, this is a very broad question, so definitely make sure to check out our video. I think it's posted on both Mi Mentor and or YouTube, the Mi Mentor YouTube channel. So make sure to check that out. But if you have additional questions after that, email us, and we might be able to better answer your question more specifically. Okay, so I'll move on to the next questions. Are nursing programs prereqs useful when applying to medical school? I'm not very familiar with the nursing program prereqs, but I assume that you guys have to have like, or I think from based on my early UCLA days, I think I remember pre-nursing classmates who were in the same classes as I was, like the core chemistry and physics, I think, classes, maybe not physics, maybe bio and chemistry. I think that they had similar core classes. I would check with an advisor to make sure, but I think, or cross-reference. On the AAMC website, you should find what are the required prereqs for medical school, and then cross-check that with your nursing program prereqs and see if they match up. That's where I would best redirect you. Crystal, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, so just echoing what Elizabeth said, I do remember having a lot of pre-nursing classmates enroll in many of the prereqs that I was enrolled in. But with that, um, I would really think about this, because if you want to do a nursing program and then apply to medical school, I don't know how uh, I don't know how medical schools will look at that, because again, you're changing your career, right? So medical schools are all about commitment, so they want to see you committed from the beginning. So I mean, if you're changing careers, that's great, go for it. But I think I wouldn't advise to go into nursing because you want to go to med school. And then I also read that someone mentioned a master's in nursing. So again, I would be very, very careful, because in terms of if you want to do a postbac, program and you're thinking that like a master might help you, yes, it will, but not in the way you're thinking that it will help you. So masters, like graduate degree classes, do not add up to your undergraduate GPA. So even if you were to get a master's in physics or biological sciences, whatever science program that you want to pursue, they wouldn't add towards your BCPM GPA. Yes, the medical school will see your graduate program, but it'll consider it as a separate GPA. So if you're thinking of doing a master's program because you want to enhance your BCPM GPA, I would highly, highly discourage you. If you're thinking of doing a master's program because you just want to add something else onto your application, you're passionate about public health or public policy, whatever it is, then go for it. But I think if you're thinking that it might help your BCPM, it's not going to help at all. So in that case, I would recommend a post-bac program, whether informal or formal. Yeah, so that's for that question. And then another question that I didn't answer as part of the other question that I read earlier is if I would recommend doing a postbac program right after undergrad. I think that depends. I think that I've met a lot of mentors that waited because they had to work. They kind of had to take care of life before committing themselves to a full-on formal postbac program. Again, a lot of formal postbac programs don't allow you to work. So you sign a contract as soon as you get in saying that you will not work and the only thing you can do is study. Um, for example, our program didn't even let us volunteer or do anything else outside of academics because they really want to make sure that you can perform to the best of your ability in terms of grades. So I think, having said that, if you have other commitments, um, your head of household, things like that, those are things that you should consider. So in that case, I guess taking time before starting a postbac program would be beneficial. If you're ready for it and you think that you are, financially well and that you're mature, you're a mature student, you're ready to start, then go for it. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yes, just very quickly. So I second everything that Crystal had to say. Just to add that I had a point. I've met a lot of students who have even in our cohort who have gone straight through, so it is a possibility. But I would look at your background, at your curriculum or package, whatever you want to call it, and um and think about it, like after the post-bac, do you think you're ready for applying to medical school? Have you done enough extracurricular activities that you feel passionate about and that you can speak very passionately and highly about, where you've learned and grown from? Have you had time to do that? Have you had time to figure out all the aspects of your medical school application? Ideally, I took a year after. So that's something. So I did the post-bac, finished the post-bac in June, and I'm taking more time off before applying to medical school. Even different people take time for different reasons, for different personal reasons, or some people study more for the MCAT. Other people want to take more time for their application. Other people want to even take more time for these extracurricular activities. But with that being said, I think I've heard, well, I guess I've heard that there's a certain number of years after which you do the post-bac that is recommended you apply. So you don't want to take too many years after your post-bac program. You want to be almost immediately ready. So while there is some leeway for you to take some years off later, you don't want to extend that time so much. So you want to be almost ready to apply. The key word is, like, I guess, almost ready to apply to medical school when you finish a post-bac program. There shouldn't be that many puzzle pieces left to put together or to go find after your post-bac program. It's almost a go after that point. So analyze your situation. If you want, email us. We can probably answer this question better based on your specific case. But then again, everybody's different, and based on people from our cohort, we were all different. Our backgrounds were different, so there's no right or wrong way or time to do it. We had a lot of our cohort who were fresh out of undergrad, and we had students who had taken a few years as well. So I hope that answers your question. Crystal, do you want to add anything else?
No, I think you've said everything. I'm typing my email address on the chat, so feel free to email me. I'm happy to mentor people, in whatever it might be. If you're applying to postbac programs, I'm happy to help you out. If you want to know more information about applying to medical school or informal postbac programs, I'm happy to do that as well. So I don't know.
I just added my email address as well, and I'm also happy to answer any questions and mentor any of you guys who might need more guidance in the process, or at least anything that I've already done. Does anybody have any last minute questions? Okay, I hope this presentation has been of use to a lot of you, and you guys can apply a lot of what